It's time now for our daily press review with Antonia Kerrigan. Antonia, you're starting in the UK, where the Labour Prime Minister is once again in hot water as fallout from the Epstein files continues.
That's quite right. Here, let's look at some front pages. The Telegraph has this headline, Starmer knew about Mandelson, red flags. Now, for a bit of context, this is after the hiring of Peter Mandelson as ambassador to the US, with known ties already at the time to Jeffrey Epstein. Well, the latest revelations show that, furthermore, adding insult to injury, he had failed a Foreign Office vetting procedure and the appointment went ahead anyway. Of course, the Prime Minister is insisting no one told him, something the Guardian satirists seem to be a little bit sceptical of. You have this image of him in 2022 calling out from the opposition dispatch box, repeatedly calling out Boris Johnson over the "I didn't know" defence. And here he is, Prime Minister himself in 2026, saying no one told him. And you have a rather smug Boris Johnson looking over his shoulder. This, of course, as he's expected to face Parliament today, and he'll continue to insist no one told him. Of course, calls for his investigation, for his resignation are multiplying. The Daily Mail has on their front page, the day Starmer has to stand up and take the blame. Now, so far, only one person has been sacked over this, and it's a senior civil servant. And on the front page of The Times, if we zoom in, you have the sacked civil servant considering a lawsuit. Ollie Robbins, former senior civil servant at the Foreign Office, who was sacked over this, may take the government to an employment tribunal. That's how unjust he feels this is. He feels he has been completely thrown under the bus. All
right, well, we'll see what Starmer has to say in Parliament later today. Let's head to Peru next, where 8 days after votes were cast in the first round of presidential elections, well, the lineup for the second round is still unknown, and there's suspicion swirling about irregularities in the poll.
Well, let's look first in the French press, where they've given us a quick overview of this on this double-page spread. They have the headline, "In Peru, a first-round shambles." Now, of course, the first spot in the second round, if you will, is already pretty certainly going to go to a far-right candidate from a far-right dynasty. Her name is Keiko Fujimori, and that's pretty much secure. Beyond that, it's between this left-wing candidate, Roberto Sanchez, and this other far-right candidate, Rafael Lopez Aliaga. But votes are still being counted, as we've said, this after enormous problems on election day. Nationwide, there were 13 polling stations that never opened. That means that 55,000 Peruvians didn't get a chance to vote. Others opened hours late, meaning voting had to go on until the next day. The electoral organising body blames a private company that had contracts and that failed to deliver equipment on time. But then there's a lot of public suspicion now over that particular company, over that choice of company, given that they reportedly had a track record for this kind of thing. Furthermore, adding insult to injury, on Thursday, 4 boxes containing 1,200 ballot papers were found in a skip. Since then, this private company, the electoral organising body, have both had police raids, which is why there's a lot of outrage. This young man is holding up a placard in protest saying fraud and calling for the detention of Piero Corvetto. That is the head of the electoral organising body. If you look a little bit further, you have this editorial in the Peruvian paper El Comercio that says no clean slate in the headline. It says this scandalous level of negligence could suggest intent. They also tell the story of how the National Elections Board has filed criminal charges against Corvetto, the head of the electoral organising body. The two institutions have very different accounts of what happened to these famous ballot papers in the skip. This editorial calls for the resignation of Piero Corvetto, a thorough investigation, saying the country has the right to know what happened. The latest in La Repubblica is that Corvetto has offered to hand in his passport to the authorities amid rumours he is planning to leave the country. A huge amount of uncertainty for the Peruvians, and of course this is all the operational side of it. Their second round is set for the 7th of June. Results are now not expected until mid-May, with all of the challenges that are likely to come between now and then. And of course, depending on the results, they could be looking down the barrel of a second round with 2 far-right candidates. I'm sure we'll discuss that more then.
Absolutely. All of that prolonging, of course, of political instability in Peru. Finally from you, Antonia, the global wedding economy is worth more than $250 billion annually. And you've been reading about the new and potentially untapped potential of the breakup economy.
Yes, well, it's a bit early for the scores on the doors on just how many billions it'll bring in, but the Times are telling us, move over newlyweds, here's a gift register for breakups. Now, 40% of Gen Z apparently believe that relationship endings deserve the same gifting rituals as weddings and engagements. And as such, Etsy, the online platform, have added an option to their website where you can register for a breakup registry. Here, I've gone online and got some screenshots for you. So you can choose to create a registry for a breakup. You might also be surprised, like me, to see you can make a registry for a new pet or a holiday. Separately, the next page, they say, congrats, when are you celebrating? Common gift choices, according to the Times, include bed sheets for those who need to start fresh. And then there's, of course, the £610 London hotel breakup suite filled with flowers and cake with an empowerment playlist of tracks by Aretha Franklin and Cher. Critics will, of course, call this shameless cashing in on heartbreak. Others will say it's supportive and empowering for people going through a vulnerable time. I don't know what you think, Alison.
I think kind of a well-known fact that when you're in a couple, you have more resources. When you're breaking up is when you tend to need more stuff. So I think I'm all for it, Antonia. All right, thank you so much. That was Antonia Garrigan with our look through today's papers. Time for us to take a short break, but stay with us if you can here on France 24. We'll be back in just a few minutes with another look at the day's news.